So hi everyone and welcome to this video discussion, and we are going to talk about chapter 1, which is the nature of visual arts. And under this topic, or under this chapter, we have 5 lessons to be discussed. Before we proceed to chapter 1, let's have a definition, or let's look at the definition of visual literacy. So initially, it was defined in terms of image interpretation and deriving meanings from visuals. And later on, Philip Yanowind said that visual literacy is the ability to understand imagery. Now, also, it is a set of abilities that enables an individual to effectively find, interpret, evaluate, use, and create images and visual media. Since we are surrounded by visual culture, so we have to be visually literate. That means we need to learn how to interpret, how to understand all these visual media, or all of these images and visuals that surround us. And visual literacy also is a skill that equips a learner to understand and analyze the contextual, cultural, ethical, aesthetic, intellectual, and technical components involved in the production and use of visual materials. Of course, if you are a visually literate individual, you are both a critical consumer of visual media, so you use media, you see visual media, but at the same time, you are also a competent contributor to a body of shared knowledge and culture. Now, under lesson 1, we are going to talk about visual arts, nature, and concept. So, the term visual arts, or the term art, comes from the Latin word ars, which means art, skill, or craft. And basically, it reflects the world around us and the times that we live in. So, as you would notice, different eras or different periods also produce different kinds of artworks. And art can inspire, provide a reflection, and provide sense of joy to us. And lastly, it is a modern and imprecise umbrella term that encompasses several artistic disciplines that fall into various subcategories. Now, when we talk about visual arts, there are five forms to it. We have the first one, drawing, which involves movement of a tool across a dry surface to create marks. And when we draw, there are different tools that we can use. We have pencils, charcoals, crayons, markers, and ink pens. On the other hand, painting naman is the application of paint, pigment, or another color medium to a surface such as a canvas, or it could also be a wall. Next, we have printmaking. So, in printmaking, unlike the previous two, in printmaking, it is designed to make more than one copy. So, you're going to create an image on one medium, but then transfer it to another, maybe using ink or pigment. But again, the design is not intended for one copy only, so more than one. And then we also have sculpture. It requires a three-dimensional piece of art in its creation. So we have, for the materials, there could be sculptures made of wood, there are some metal, some are made of stone, and some are even plastic. But nowadays, there are other materials used. I saw in one of the videos in YouTube wherein a person or an artist was sculpting using the lead of a pencil. So that is still considered a sculpture. And also the last one is photography, which involves manipulating light to create images. And of course, we use different tools for that. Here are different examples for each visual art. We have here drawing, and the Mona Lisa is an example for painting. This is a Japanese art, but I actually forgot the name, but this is an example of printmaking. So you would see this kind of visual art in many forms. And then here we have the sculpture. This is this is an ancient sculpture actually. And lastly, of course, we have the photography. Okay, now to understand how we can interpret, or how we can make meaning of any visual art, we have to look into the elements of art. And when we say the elements of art, these are the building blocks or the ingredients that the artists use to create different kinds of art. Starting off with line. So there are different kinds of lines, and a line means a mark with length and direction, and it is a continuous mark made on a surface by a moving point. Now you would notice here in the artwork of Leonardo da Vinci's Virgin and Child with Saint Anne, when looking at this part, we can, of course, there is somehow an idea that there are lines used, but when we take out all the colors and other elements, we would clearly see the different kinds of lines used by Leonardo da Vinci. So we have here vertical lines, we have curved lines, we also have horizontal lines, and a lot of diagonal lines as well, and also vertical lines. Now, all of these lines actually have different meanings. So when we talk about horizontal lines, they mean rest, infinity, and perfect stability. If we see vertical lines, it could mean dominance or power. But diagonal lines mean there is action, there is movement, thus there is unrest and uncertainty. While curved lines, it could depict smoothness, softness, or continuity. So through these lines, we can it can help us come up with a certain meaning of the art that we are looking at. Of course, another one is the color. So when we talk about the color, it consists of hue, which is another term for color, and also intensity, which refers to how bright or how dull the color is, and value, which refers to the lightness or darkness of a color. So when you look at art, you can by or through the colors, the artist can express certain messages. For example, white denotes the presence of light, while the use of black denotes the absence of light. However, this is not universal. It can change from different. It can change based on what the artist intend the meaning of the art to be, and also it depends on the how the audience or the interpreter would interpret the message. Now under color is value. So value refers to how light or how dark the color is. We can achieve light if we mix the color with white, and also the amount of white can dictate also how light the color will be, while if you add black, of course that adds to a dark, or that will turn the color into much darker of a pigment. So we have here two artworks that use value. We have here Pablo Picasso and MC Escher. So what value did was it added a certain message, maybe a melancholic or a sad effect to the visual art, because of again the dark value or the darkness. And in this visual art, there, even if there are parts that are still there that are light, but still it produces certain effects and adds to the message, or how we would interpret the message of the artwork. Next, we have the shape. So the shape is an enclosed area defined and determined by other elements, and it is two-dimensional. So we have, for example, in this art by Gustave Caillebotte, we have a lot of shapes used that can be seen. We have ovals, we have circle, we also have rectangles, we also have squares, and so on. So these shapes actually add value, add meaning to the visual art. Next, we have form. A form is a three-dimensional object. So or it could also be something that's two-dimensional, but it appears to be three-dimensional. For example, if you say triangle, so triangle is basically a shape, but when you add another dimension to it, so it now becomes a pyramid. So the pyramid now becomes a 3D, and it now is termed or under form. Next, we have space. So space naman, in different kinds of artworks, different spaces are used. So when you talk about space, it is the distance or area between, around, above, below, or within things. For landscapes like this, there are what you call there are foreground, middle ground, and background. So when you say foreground, it's the area that is closest to the viewer. So we have this part as our foreground, while the middle ground is, of course, seen in the middle. And then we have here at the back is the background, and the background creates depth. So we need this middle ground here for as a transition going to the background. Now the difference between the middle ground and the foreground and the middle ground is that the foreground has more details compared to the middle ground, while the background has the least details of them all. Then also in this kind of visual art, we have two spaces found here or used here. We have the positive space and the negative space. When you say positive, it is the one that is filled. So in this artwork, it would be this part. This is the positive, while the negative space is the surrounding area. So that's how space is used in different visual art. Lastly, we have the texture. So the texture is the surface quality or the feel of an object, its smoothness, its roughness, softness, and so on. And there are artworks that look soft and feel soft, but there are also artworks that may look soft, but when you touch it, it's not actually soft. So that's what we call implied texture. Just like this one as an example. So it looks, based on how it looks like, it seems rough, but we don't know if it's an actual texture or if it's an implied texture.